Text on screen. This is a true story shared by a Reddit user.
Names have been changed. 3 days before my wedding, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when a notification popped up. Not from my number, from my future mother-in-law's phone.
She'd added me to the wrong group chat.
For 11 minutes, I read messages that were never meant for my eyes. And by the time I put the phone down, I knew my wedding wasn't happening. My name is Emily Carter. This is the story of how one message changed my entire life 3 days before I was supposed to say I do.
Stay with me until the end,
because the way this story ends is not what you'd expect. I met James Whitfield 4 years ago at a friend's birthday dinner in Chicago. I almost didn't go that night.
I'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital where I worked as a nurse, and all I wanted was my bed.
My roommate practically dragged me out the door. James was sitting across the table,
laughing at something one of my friends said.
And when our eyes met, he did this small thing. He slid the bread basket toward me before I even asked for it.
Small, almost nothing, but I noticed it.
We talked for 2 hours that night about nothing important. His job in commercial real estate,
my work in the ICU, how neither of us like cilantro.
He walked me to my car afterward and didn't try anything. Just said, "I'd like to see you again, if that's okay," and waited for my answer instead of assuming it.
Over the next few months, I learned James was the kind of person who remembered things.
He remembered that my father passed away when I was 19, and that certain songs on the radio still made my chest tighten. He remembered my coffee order, my sister's birthday, the name of my childhood dog.
It's easy, looking back now, to see how those small kindnesses built a foundation of trust so solid
that I never thought to question what was happening underneath it. We dated for 2 years.
Then, on a spring evening, he brought me to a rooftop bar downtown that he said was for a friend's work event. When we got there, it was empty except for string lights,
our favorite song playing quietly, and James down on one knee.
His hands were shaking more than mine. I said yes before he even finished the sentence.
For the next year and a half, our lives revolved almost entirely around planning the wedding. James's family had money, not extravagant, but comfortable. His father, Richard, ran a mid-sized logistics company that had been in the family for 2 generations. His mother, Diane, hadn't worked outside the home since marrying into it 30 years earlier. She filled her days with charity boards, tennis, and, as I'd later learn,
a level of involvement in her son's life that went far beyond what I understood at the time.
I came from a very different world. My mother raised my younger brother and me alone after my father died, working 2 jobs, days at a dental office,
nights doing bookkeeping for a small business,
just to keep our apartment and put food on the table. I paid my own way through nursing school with loans and a part-time job at a pharmacy. Nobody handed me anything.
The first time I met Diane,
she hugged me and told me how happy she was that James had finally found someone real.
She complimented my dress, asked thoughtful questions about my work in the ICU,
and seemed, on the surface, completely warm.
But there was a coolness underneath that warmth that I couldn't quite name.
It showed up in small comments. "Oh, you did your own dress alterations?"
How resourceful, said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes.
It showed up in the way she'd sometimes redirect conversations back to James's
achievements the moment mine came up.
I told myself it was nerves. I told myself every mother is protective of her only son. I wanted so badly to believe I was overthinking it that I trained myself not to notice. Richard, James's father,
was quieter, polite, distant, the kind of man who
shook my hand firmly and asked
about the market like I was a business associate,
rather than his future daughter-in-law. James's younger sister, Chloe, was the easiest to talk to. She was 24, still finding her footing after college, and she and I had actually become close over the 18 months of engagement. Or so I thought.
Looking back now, there were signs, small ones, easy to dismiss individually, that formed a pattern I refused to see as a whole.
The first was the group chat.
A few months into the engagement, Chloe mentioned, almost in passing,
that the family had a group chat where they planned things, gift ideas for holidays, inside jokes, updates.
I asked, half joking, if I'd be added once we got married. Chloe laughed and said, "Oh, that's more of a Whitfield blood thing. You know how my MOM is." I remember feeling a small sting at that phrase, Whitfield blood, but I let it go. I brought it up to James once, lightly, over dinner. "So there's a secret family group chat I'm never getting into." I meant it as a joke.
He laughed it after quickly. "It's just family stuff, babe. Nothing exciting."
"You are not missing anything." I believed him, because I wanted to.
Then there was the engagement dinner. 5 months before the wedding.
I'd gone to the restroom and was
Walking back toward the private
dining room when I overheard
Diane's voice through the partially open door.
talking to her sister, my future aunt-in-law. Well, Diane said, swirling her wine, we'll see how long this one lasts.
I stopped walking,
My future aunt said something I couldn't quite hear.
and Diane laughed. Not a crow laugh.
More of a tired, knowing one, before catching sight of me approaching and switching.
Instantly to a warm smile. Emily, there you are. We were just talking about the seating chart.
I sat back down at that table and finished my dinner and told myself
Over and over that I had misheard.
that this one could have meant anything.
I wanted it to mean anything else. That night, after the dinner, I went to my mother's house instead of home. I sat at her kitchen table, the same one I'd done homework on as a kid, and told her what I'd overheard. My mother, who had raised 2 children,
Alone and had an instinct for people that I'd learned to trust over the years, went quiet for a moment. Emmy, she said finally.
using the nickname she only used when she was being serious. I am not saying don't marry him. I like James, but
You pay attention to how his family talks about you when they don't think.
you are listening. That tells you more than any toast at the wedding will. I nodded and told her she was probably right. And then, because I was in love and 18 months deep into planning a wedding,
I did exactly what people do in these situations. I filed it away and kept moving forward.
the next sign came a few weeks later, over the prenup conversation. Richard brought it up gently at a family dinner, just a formality. He said, to protect the business, nothing personal. I didn't object.
I had nothing to hide and nothing of my own that needed protecting. Or so I thought at the time. But I noticed James was unusually tense during that conversation.
Glancing at his phone twice like he was expecting or dreading a message. When I asked him about it later, he said it was just work stress. I let that go too.
Before I keep going, I want to pause here for a second, because I know some of you are already yelling at your screen. Some of you are thinking, girl, the group chat comment alone would have had me asking real questions.
Others are thinking, people say weird things at dinner parties. That's not proof of anything. And honestly, both of you are right. That's exactly the trap of hindsight.
Every warning sign is obvious after you know how the story ends.
In the moment when you love someone,
When you've already sent the save the dates and put deposits on venues,
you explain things away.
you want to be wrong about your doubts.
I want you to keep that feeling in mind.
Because what happened next didn't come from a hunch. It came from an accident.
A single misdirected message that ripped away every explanation.
I'd been giving myself for months. 3 days before the wedding, I was staying at my mother's house. A tradition, sort of, since my dad
Wasn't around to walk
me down the aisle, and my MOM and I had decided to spend those last few nights
together the way we used to when I was a kid. I was in bed, finishing the final seating chart on my laptop, phone resting beside me when it buzzed.
A notification preview popped up on the lock screen.
Not addressed to me. A message that had come through because
Diane had accidentally added my number to the family group chat instead of her cousin's.
a woman who also happened to be saved in her contacts as Emily C.
I only meant to glance at it and dismiss it.
Instead, I opened the group. The messages went back almost 8 months.
At first, they were exactly what you'd expect. Dress fitting updates, venue cost breakdowns,
Complaints about seating arrangements.
the usual noise of wedding planning.
I told myself,
I'd just scroll for a minute out of curiosity and then leave the group before Diane noticed her mistake.
then I found a message from Diane, sent to Richard and Chloe 7 weeks earlier.
I still don't think she's right for him, but there's no point fighting it now, at least once they're married.
James will finally have access to the trust properly, and we can talk him into folding it back into the business. I read it twice.
My stomach dropped somewhere I couldn't name. I scribbled further, hands shaking now.
There was a reply from Richard. The prenup will protect what matters. Business stays business. Not protect James. Not protect the marriage. Protect the business.
Then I found a message from James himself, sent 2 weeks before the wedding, in that same group. Once the wedding's done and things settle, I'll bring up moving the trust into the joint investment.
She won't even ask questions. She trusts me completely.
I sat completely still.
I read that line for times.
Like maybe on the 5th read it would say something different. My fiancé, the man I was marrying in 3 days,
The man who remembered my coffee order and the name of my childhood dog,
had been discussing my late father's trust fund with his family, planning in writing to redirect it into the family business,
and describing my trust in him not as something to honor,
but as something to exploit. She won't even ask questions. It wasn't only the money. though the money was real and it mattered.
It was the casualness, the way I was spoken about like a transaction quietly closing.
Like a detail to manage rather than a person joining a family.
I didn't cry. Not at first.
I felt something inside me go very still and very cold. I took screenshots of every relevant message. Diane's, Richard's, James's, methodically. My nurse training kicking in. The part of me that knows how to function calmly in a crisis. Then I closed my phone and lay there in the dark of my childhood bedroom for most of the night, staring at the ceiling, deciding what I was going to do.
I didn't call James that night.
I waited until morning, because I needed to be steady, not shaking. When I said what I had to say,
I texted him, "Can you come over? We need to talk."
he arrived within the hour, still in his gym clothes, smiling, asking if I was excited or nervous about the big day.
I didn't answer.
I handed him my phone, already open to the screenshots.
I watched his face change in real time.
Confusion first, then recognition, then something that looked like panic trying to disguise itself as calm.
"Emily,
It's not what it looks like," he said.
we were just talking. My family gets carried away sometimes. You know how my MOM is." "Then explain the part where you said I wouldn't even ask questions," I said.
My voice came out steadier than I felt.
"Explain the part where you and your family had a plan for my father's money before."
I even knew you had one. He tried a few more explanations, that it was just an idea being floated, that nothing was decided, that his family had always talked that way, and it didn't mean anything real. Each excuse contradicted the one before it, and I let him talk himself in circles for almost 20 minutes.
Mostly because some part of me was still hoping
He'd say something.
that would make it make sense.
Then I asked him directly,
"Did you ever intend to move my trust
"Fund into your families?"
business without discussing it with me first, as an equal, as your wife?" He hesitated. It wasn't a long hesitation, maybe 2 seconds.
But I felt it land like a physical blow. In that pause, I had my answer.
"I need you to leave," I told him. He didn't leave quietly. He called his mother right there in my living room, on speaker, maybe thinking she could talk me down.
Maybe thinking I'd feel embarrassed enough by the confrontation to back off.
Diane's voice came through, still composed, still warm at the edges even now. "Emily, sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding."
Families talk about all sorts of things. It doesn't mean.
"I read the messages, Diane," I said.
All of them.
"Including the one about how you'll see how long this one lasts."
I heard you say that at the engagement dinner too. I just didn't want to believe it.
There was a silence on the other end of the
Phone that told me everything her words hadn't. No apology came.
Instead, after a beat, she simply said,
"Well, I suppose we'll all need some time to process this," as if I were the one who'd done something wrong.
I ended the call myself. I told James, one final time, that the wedding was off, and asked him to leave my mother's house. My mother had been in the next room the entire time,
Close enough to hear most of it.
and the moment the door closed behind James, she came in and just held me, not saying anything at first.
She knew, better than almost anyone, that some moments don't need words yet. When I finally spoke, I told her everything, start to finish. The trust fund, the messages, the 2-second hesitation that told me more than any explanation could have. My mother, who had spent 19 years raising 2 kids alone after losing my father,
who had watched every dollar and fought for every inch of stability we had,
went very quiet. Then she said the only thing that mattered. "You are not marrying a family that talks about you like a line item.
not while I'm alive to stop it." That afternoon, sitting at her kitchen table,
We cancelled 1.5 years of planning in a single sitting. I called the venue first. My hands were steady by then.
strangely, and explained, simply, that the wedding was off.
The florist next, then the caterer, then the string quartet we booked for the ceremony.
Some vendors were kind about it. One, the venue coordinator, quietly told me, for what it's worth, in 15 years of doing this job, I've learned
That the people who cancel 3
days out for a real
reason are almost always right to.
I didn't ask her to explain how she knew that. I just thanked her. I never heard a word of apology from James's family. What I heard instead, through 2 mutual friends within the week, was that Diane had been telling people
I'd gotten cold feet and humiliated the family by cancelling so close to the date. Not one word to anyone about the messages. Not one acknowledgement of what had actually happened. It's been just over a year since that night at my mother's kitchen table. About 4 months ago, I ran into James at a mutual friend's engagement party. The kind of small, unavoidable collision.
that happens in a city where your
Social circles still overlap.
he looked the same, mostly. A little thinner, maybe. We ended up near the same drink table for an uncomfortable 30 seconds. You look good, he said. I heard you moved into your own place downtown.
I did, I said. There was a pause where, a year earlier, I might have felt the old pull to smooth things over, to make the moment less awkward for both of us.
I didn't feel it this time.
For what it's worth, he said quietly, I think about it.
What I said in that chat.
I know that's not. I know it doesn't fix anything.
I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. I just said, I hope you figure out who you want to be around.
Money and trust before you're in this position again with someone else.
And I walked back to my friends. It wasn't cruel.
It was just honest, and it was the last real conversation I've had with him.
My father's trust fund is exactly where it should be, under my own name, my own control.
Untouched by anyone's plans but mine. I moved into my own apartment downtown, something I hadn't done since college, because James and I had always planned to move in together after the wedding. I've since redone the whole place in colors I picked entirely for myself.
Which sounds small.
But after 18 months of compromising on centerpieces and seating charts, choosing my own paint color felt like getting a piece of myself back. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. I loved James, or at least I loved who I believed he was for years.
Grief for a relationship that ends because of betrayal is a strange, layered thing. You're mourning the future you planned and the past you thought was real. At the same time.
But I've come to understand something in the years since. Love isn't supposed to come with private conversations about your money, your trust, your future.
Conversations you were never invited into and never meant to see. A partnership built in secret, even a small one,
is still built on a foundation that can't hold weight forever.
If there's one thing I hope you take from this,
it's this. Pay attention to how the people around someone you love talk about you when they don't think you're listening.
Pay attention to hesitations,
to inside jokes about how long this one lasts,
to group chats you're quietly excluded from. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive as a dramatic confession. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in a group chat you were never supposed to see,
waiting for one accidental notification to change everything.
I didn't lose a wedding that night.
I found out exactly who I was marrying
3 days before it would have been too late to walk away,
and I'll take the timing, painful as it was,
as the luckiest accident of my life.
If this story hit home for you, tell me in the comments. Has a single message or a single overheard conversation
ever changed the entire course of your life?
I read every comment, and your stories might be featured in a future video. Subscribe for real stories like this one every week.
And I'll see you in the next one.